What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and to the second game review of Season 3. Today I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the Gladiators pulling off the upset victory over the San Francisco Shock. Other than the final result, obviously, this game was pretty insane. There were a lot of big moments that I really took a mental note of, and I feel really motivated to talk about it with you guys. Plus, I know a bunch of you have been asking for me to do another review video, so here you go. So first things first, let me get this out of the way for all of the trolls who love to see me fail. Boy, was I wrong about this game. I'm sorry for having such a lack of faith, especially in the DPS. I really didn't give the Gladiators much of a chance, but they came out and showed that their performance against the Titans was no fluke. Those boys are locked in. They've solidified themselves as a top tier team in the league as of right now. It's a well-deserved label that I'm more than willing to give them now. Congrats on that win, Gladiators Nation. Let's take a look back at that monumental victory. So to start this match, we headed down to Ilios, and in it, both teams came out of the gates with some interesting looking lineups. On the side of the Shock, Ansan Sniper, also known as ANS, was in alongside Striker. Then unsurprisingly, at least in my opinion at the time of that match going live, we saw Smurf start at the main tank position for what I presume to be a stronger Orisa player in the game for the Shock, and once again, Architect would come out on support, but unlike last time, Moth was on the bench and Violet was in at flex support. With Moth's strongest hero being unavailable for play, I suppose this type of strategy could make sense. As for the Gladiators, well, their changes were fairly minor, but still noticeable. OG got the start over LH Cloudy. I suppose that mostly had to do with him just having a really high skill ceiling, and Mirror would come in over Jaro. With there not being a ton of Mei being played this week, it doesn't come as a super big surprise to see Mirror get an increase in playtime. Now with the two lineup set, we head on over to Ilios Lighthouse for part 1 of this control map, and the Gladiators wasted no time in gaining my attention here as they come out of the gates with a Wrecking Ball Zarya dive comp. And right from the start, this composition gave the Shock trouble. The chaos of the DPS constantly dogging for the Shock tanks and supports proved to be problematic. Not to mention that Space went clutch god mode with the Zarya at the end of the round. While the first section of this map was close percentage-wise, there were some clear advantages in favor of the Gladiators. Their Rein Zarya comp was stronger when they decided to later on swap to Rein, and Space absolutely outplayed his counterpart in Choyobin. And while we tend to think of Striker as this godlike Tracer player, Birdring was giving him all he could handle in the mirror match. With Los Angeles claiming first blood, the Shock looked to rebound on Ruins, and at the start, they made their presence known. Ansan was clicking heads for days on the Widow, and Birdring ultimately decided to play more with his team rather than taking a chance to countersnipe such a deadly foe, and that was probably for the best. Although he was a problem early on, the Gladiators chose to focus more on winning in the trenches up front, and as we all know, that ended up working to their favor. As soon as they got into position without getting picked off by the Widow, the point immediately flipped in their favor, and once it happened, they never looked back. They never lost the point again. The rest of this round was all Gladiators. There were a few close moments along the way, like when the Shock started the final team fight by trading 2 for 2, but OG's clutch shatter made sure to end any hope of the Shock forging a comeback on this map. Okay, so after map 1, there were some major things I took a mental note of. For one, the Gladiators tank line looked a lot more comfortable than that of the Shock. OG and Space looked far better with that Rein Zarya execution, and honestly, the more I think about it, the more I believe it makes sense. That type of tank combo absolutely favors Space and OG. Smurf's best hero on the Shock last year was his Orisa, and a hero like Zarya is a bit more out of Choi's comfort zone. Choi may be a fast learner, but if that playoff game against the Reign from last year tells you anything, it usually takes him at least a week to adjust. So after winning the first map, the Glads walked into Route 66 with complete and utter confidence. But before talking about the outcome, the Shock did shuffle things up with their substitutions. Super in for Choyobin, Moth in at main support, and Architect slides over to DPS and replaces Ansan. The second and third ones don't come as a big surprise, but I can't say the same for Super subbing in for Choi. I wasn't expecting that at all, if I'm going to be honest. I thought that they'd maybe play a bunch of Orisa Rein if that was their plan, but no. That wasn't the case at all. Primarily, on the Shock's attack, they ran Reinhardt Wrecking Ball with a Genji. They only ran the thing you'd expect them to for like the final minute and a half, and that too ended up resulting in a disaster. They tried to get value out of Nanoblade, but between the amount of crowd control and the Transcendence readily available to counter it, Architect had zero chance of having a serious impact. I'm not the biggest fan of what the Shock tried to do here. Running Genji and Tracer into Orisa Sigma and a Brig on top of it is a tragedy waiting to happen. There was not a single kill found by the Shock on their attack. Not one. It was pure domination, and as a result, They got full held on Route 66. Oh, and big shout out to my boy Space for that rock snipe on the striker near the end of the round. That was a thing of beauty. So now it was time for the Gladiators to attack. The distance to victory was very short, and they took full advantage of this. Not even 2 minutes into their attack, and it was all over already. Space and Mira made it look like a casual day of playing ranked as the Gladiators took a swift 2-0 lead over the defending champs. So now if you're the Shock, there's good reason to panic. You're getting outplayed, and no substitution or strategy seems to be making a difference. That is until they come out with Sinatra on off-tank. From the perspective of wanting a better Zarya in the game to counter Space, this totally makes sense. But at the same time, now you're completely one-dimensional. In this scenario, Sinatra can only really play Zarya, so if your opponent finds a way to counterplay you, then you'll be at their mercy due to your inability to swap. But for the entirety of Numbani, that problem never came into fruition. Sinatra did his job. He came in off the bench and provided the spark this team needed to keep this series going for a little longer. His teammates did an excellent job of playing around his Zarya, and it felt like the old days of watching Super and Sinatra as a power duo. His consistent high energy made him a true threat, and when you combine that with the nano boost he was receiving, the guy was pretty much this unstoppable force. I mean, the Shock rolled so hard on their attack that they set the new record for the fastest completion of Numbani with a 3-minute 7-second time bank. The Gladiators gave it their all to try and match this, or at least finish the map, but it just wasn't meant to be. The sudden substitution of Sinatra caught them completely off guard. While Sinatra was certainly a huge difference maker this map, I also feel it's necessary to highlight Violet. From this map onward, I felt that he caught fire. A lot of people meme on the guy and say he isn't even the best Ana player on his team, but he came out and put on a show. Some of the sleep darts this guy was hitting were out of this world. I swear that some of the players on the side of LA weren't even allowed to play the game half the time. How many times did we see him sleep Birdring or OG? It was ridiculous. Beautiful stuff from Violet to try and do his part to keep his team in the game. So now as we head into Volskaya Industries, it kind of felt like the momentum was starting to shift more into the Shock's favor, but the Glads had a plan. Subbing in for Mir would be Jaro, and on their attack, things seemed to once again be going in their favor, as they took point A with relative ease and managed to finish the map overall with some time left. I gotta give them credit. They made some fast and furious adjustments to compensate for this new Shock lineup that gave them so much trouble on Numbani. They decided to play more defensively from what I've noticed with double shield, while Birdring flanked the backline a lot. And I mean, at first, it worked so good that for a few moments it looked like the Gladiators were about to finish the map with a massive time bank. But thanks to some perseverance and some of the most insane stalling I've ever seen, the Shock significantly diminished the time bank of their enemies. The situation could have been a lot less manageable to try and match. If that first fight on point B had gone worse, then the Shock would have been staring at near impossible odds to overcome. As the two teams swapped sides, the Gladiators opted to roll with double shield Hanzo, while the Shock were more interested in playing a super brawly comp with Rein, Zarya, Reaper, Doomfist, and Brig. And although the Gladiators would ultimately give up the first point, I have to give some love to my man Jaro. The guy's Hanzo looked clean. Now granted, it was only for like a minute and a half, but still, gotta give credit where it's due. What sucks for the Glads though is that the Shock kind of snowballed with the momentum they were building, so none of it really mattered. San Francisco not only finished the map, but also with a noticeably better time bank. Did the thought of possibly getting reverse swept scare the Gladiators though? No, not in the slightest. It was a very scrappy affair, but the Gladiators did manage to get a third point on the board by securing yet another point A capture. And with them coming up on 3 ultimates, there was serious snowball potential for them. That is until Sinatra came in. It might not have been the flashiest way to stop their opponent, but he took advantage of the fact that Space was already coming back from long spawn on the final attack by further putting the numbers in his team's favor with a solo grab onto Big Goose. The fight would last a long while after this initial action, but the Shock stood tall and kept their opponents from making any more progress. And shout out to Space for nearly building an Earthshatter in like 30 seconds of him playing a Rein off a panic swap. The good news for the Gladiators though is that their win condition was now set. Keep the Shock from acquiring point A and victory was theirs, but they had to be careful here. If they were to overcommit on the first point, then we might be looking at a 2-2 scoreline heading into the 5th map. And at first, the situation did not look promising. The Shock got the point with 2 minutes still on the clock, and their ultimate economy put them in prime position to get a tick during the following fight. But it never happened. There would be no one fight for the Shock. On that initial fight, they committed both Grav and Nano, but it ended up being neutralized by a well-timed Transcendence from Shaz. After that, we saw an easily won fight thanks to OG Supercharger, and the rest is history. The Shock never really got another chance to fight, as they kind of just got held close to their spawn for the rest of the round. With the overtime wick completely burnt out, we concluded Volskaya with a draw. With every map type available now being played at least once, it was time for control from here on out, and the Gladiators decided to end it right there and then. there would be no reverse sweep on this Saturday. There's not much to say about this final map, I'll be honest. The Shock just got dominated. Oasis was so one-sided. Gardens was basically the mirror show. His doom caused all sorts of problems for the Shock, and Space honestly was outperforming Sinatra on a signature Zarya. If it weren't for Violet's heroic effort, the Glads honestly might have just won this round 100-0. But if you thought Gardens was crazy, just wait until we look what happened on University. Both teams surprisingly ran the same comp for once, as this section of the map seems to favor the close quarters brawl comps. And even though the Shock had been showing promise with this comp the whole game, the Gladiators came in and played it way better. Once again, the Shock could only muster control of the point one time. The Gladiators convincingly beat down the opposition, and OG was making Super look like a chump with how much better he was playing on the Rhine. The part of this round that really alarmed me was during the fight where the Gladiators had, I think, around 50% point progress. The Shock were getting close to 6 fully charged ultimates, and the Gladiators had 4 in total. Even though there was probably no hope of rescuing Super because of the punishment he was receiving from Space's Grav, the Shock committed Death Blossom, Meteor Strike, and Coalescence to try and turn this fight around. But by simply matching the Shock with 3 ults of their own, the Gladiators won the fight and were now entering one fight territory. And guess what? Just to even get some progress on the board, the Shock were forced to use the remaining ultimates in the next fight that they had in their disposal, which put them in a very poor position to win the next fight easily, even if the Gladiators weren't in much of a better position in terms of ultimate economy. But I mean, if you're the Gladiators, you take this current situation you're in all day, every day. You traded 4 ults for literally everything the Shock were working with, and now you just needed to win one more fight to take this series. It goes both ways though. There was a serious chance for the Shock to get back into this map thanks to how even the playing field was. And with how the initial fight started off, it looked like the Shock might be able to hold on. That is until OG said he wanted those stupid Shock noobs out of his server. Super going down early in the fight meant that he had the freest 3-man shatter of his career, and with a nano boost thrown in for good measure, the Gladiator seized control of the point and pulled off the 3-1 upset victory over the San Francisco Shock. What a series this was. So many epic performances and big time surprises as well. So let's talk about the Shock. The Shock ran some bizarre lineups that really didn't work. I'm hoping the coaching staff realizes that constantly putting their DPS players on off roles may not be the best idea. Last year their substitutions made sense, but these ones felt a bit more unorthodox, and the general discomfort of the players reflects upon this. I'm not saying this is the end of the world, because we literally saw the Shock have early struggles last year, then go on to win the championship, but I can't help but feel like there's reason to feel nervous if you support the Shock. We could always chalk this up as an off day that will inevitably make them stronger later down the line, or that they weren't taking the game seriously because the environment made it feel like a scrim. But the fact of the matter remains that they also lost to the Valiant. Plus, there's rumors from what I hear that there's internal discord within the org right now. I'm not saying any of this is 100% confirmed, but in their present state, I can't help but wonder what's going on right now. Let's get off this topic though. This is really negative stuff. Let's conclude on a more positive note though. The Gladiators have established this identity of being able to hang in there with some of the really good teams. That is, if that Dynasty loss was just a fluke or they just had an off day. Behind the consistent play of Space, Big Goose, and Shaz, and the resurgence of OG and Birdring, plus their 2 rookie DPS players, the Gladiators are now in this conversation as one of the early season favorites to be a potential title contender. I really have to apologize to them. I didn't think their DPS had it in them to compete with the best of the best, but so far, they've proved me wrong. All of their players looked extremely sharp. From Birdring outdueling Striker to OG showing up super in the Rhine battle, everything they did was amazing. But the man of the hour for me has to be Space. The birthday boy's fingerprints were all over this one. His Sigma play looked reminiscent of what we saw in the World Cup, and what he did on Zarya deserves to receive the highest honor. This is the reigning MVP of the league we're talking about. That was the hero that Sinatra made a name for himself on, and yet Space was able to keep up with him and in some instances outplay him. Shout out to you, Space. Without your efforts, who knows how this game could have gone. Congrats to Los Angeles on their big win. I look forward to seeing what these guys can accomplish next. I'm sure this will give them a major confidence boost moving forward. If they can keep this level of play up for the rest of the season, then they seriously might go far. They have the coaching assets and talent to pull this off. Now let's see if they can execute. And just like that, we're at the end of my game review. So if you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, and make sure to let me know down in the comment section what stood out to you in this match. And if you love my videos and wish to support me in other ways, then consider following me on Twitter, joining the community Discord, and purchasing a channel membership. And as always, thanks so much for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it a ton. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.